Let's get right into it. Number 10. The Real-Life Cyclops. Imagine walking through an ancient cave and finding a massive skull with what looks like one giant eye socket right in the middle. That's exactly what happened to ancient Greeks thousands of years ago. They weren't finding the remains of one-eyed giants. They were actually stumbling across dwarf elephant skulls. You're living in ancient Greece. You've never seen an elephant in your life. You don't even know what fossils are. And you just found this massive skull with what looks like one huge eye hole in the middle. That eye hole was actually where the elephant's trunk used to connect to its skull. Elephants have this huge nasal cavity right in the middle of their face. It's like having a massive nostril in the center of your skull. The size of these skulls made it even more convincing. These weren't regular elephant skulls. They were from dwarf elephants. But dwarf is kind of misleading here. The perfect size for what ancient Greeks imagined a human-like giant would have. These skulls were mostly found in caves around the Mediterranean, the same areas where Homer wrote about Cyclopes living in caves in the Odyssey. Scientists don't think this is a coincidence. The ancient Greeks found these weird skulls, made up stories about one-eyed giants, and those stories got passed down until they became legend. Number 9. The Gateway to the Underworld. Imagine you're an ancient Roman tourist visiting the city of Hierapolis. Your guide takes you to this mysterious cave entrance. There's this eerie mist coming out of the ground. The guide throws a bird into the cave entrance to show you something. The bird drops dead instantly. Welcome to Pluto's Gate, the ancient world's most metal tourist attraction. For centuries, people thought this was just another crazy story from ancient times. But in 2013, archaeologists discovered the actual cave entrance that ancient writers had been talking about. Scientists found that this place is literally pumping out clouds of carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is so concentrated that it forms an invisible lake of death near the ground. Any small animal that walks into it basically enters nature's gas chamber. Ancient priests would do these demonstrations where they'd lead animals into the cave entrance. The animals would drop dead, but the priests would walk out just fine. People thought it was divine protection from the gods. But really, these clever priests just knew that carbon dioxide is heavier than air, so they'd stand up straight while the deadly gas pooled around their feet. Meanwhile, the poor animals, being closer to the ground, would get the full blast. The ancient writer Strabo described this place in perfect detail almost 2,000 years ago. He wrote about how the air was so thick with deadly mist that you could barely see the ground. He talked about how birds would just drop dead if they flew too close. Modern scientists measured the carbon dioxide levels in that cave. Turns out the concentration is so high, it could kill a human in minutes. Number 8. The Monster Wave. Imagine you're a sailor in the 1800s. The sea is calm, your ship is steady, and everything seems perfect. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, a wall of water taller than your ship rises up. For centuries, sailors told stories about these monster waves. They called them holes in the ocean, because they'd often come with a massive dip in the water before the wave hit. But scientists thought these sailors were just telling tall tales. Turns out those sailors were right all along. On January 1st, 1995, at the Draupner oil platform in the North Sea, the platform's equipment recorded a wave that was 84 feet tall. That's about the height of an 8-story building just casually passing by. This wave didn't follow any of the rules scientists thought waves should follow. Normal ocean waves build up gradually, but this one just showed up like an uninvited guest at a party. The ocean suddenly drops away beneath your ship, forming a giant pit. Then that missing water comes back as a massive wave. It's like the ocean is playing a deadly game of peekaboo with ships. Scientists think these monster waves form when multiple wave patterns crash into each other just right. Kind of like when you're in the bathtub, and you make waves from different directions meet. Except instead of splashing your rubber duck, these waves can sink entire ships. Scientists now estimate that at any given moment, there are about 10 rogue waves active somewhere in the world's oceans. Number 7. The Singing Statues of Memnon. You're in ancient Egypt just before dawn, standing in front of 2 massive stone statues. Each one is about 60 feet tall. As the first rays of sunlight hit these giants, the statues start to sing, not like a power ballad, but more like a weird whistling or humming sound. Sometimes it was like a trumpet. Other times it was like someone strumming a broken guitar string. Ancient Greeks and Romans would travel thousands of miles just to hear this spooky morning concert. They believed it was the voice of Memnon, a mythical king, crying out to his mother Eos, the goddess of dawn. Scientists finally figured out what was really going on. These statues are made of quartzite sandstone, which is full of tiny holes. During the night, dew would settle into these holes, When the morning sun hit the statues, it would heat up the stone. This caused the water to evaporate super fast, creating vibrations in the rock that produced the sound. It's like when you blow across the top of a bottle, only in this case, the bottle is a 60-foot-tall ancient Egyptian king. The craziest part is this only happened because the statues were damaged. In 27 BC, a massive earthquake cracked one of them. This crack created the perfect conditions for this musical performance. But then, some genius decided to fix the statue. Around 200 AD, Roman Emperor Septimius Severus ordered repairs on the cracked statue, and just like that, the morning concert stopped. Number 6. The Griffin's Bones. About 2,500 years ago, ancient gold prospectors were digging for gold in the Gobi Desert. Instead, they found a massive skull with a beak like a giant eagle, attached to the body of a four-legged beast. What they actually found was a Protoceratops fossil, but they didn't know that. All they knew was they discovered the remains of a creature that shouldn't exist. This is probably how the legend of the Griffin was born. Protoceratops was a dinosaur about the size of a sheep, with a beak like a parrot and a bony frill behind its head. When its fossils are partially exposed by wind and erosion, they look exactly like what ancient people described as griffins. The ancient Greeks described these creatures as gold-guarding beasts. Many Protoceratops fossils are found in gold-rich areas. When ancient prospectors went looking for gold, they kept finding these weird bird-lizard skeletons. They probably thought these creatures were guarding the gold. The Greeks also said griffins built nests and laid eggs. The Gobi Desert is full of dinosaur nests and eggs. Some of the first dinosaur eggs ever discovered were found there. These ancient traders weren't just finding weird skeletons, they were finding nests and eggs too. Some scientists argue this is all just coincidence. They say the griffin myth started somewhere else, but you have weird bird-lizard skeletons found near gold deposits with nests and eggs. That's a lot of coincidences. Number 5. The Amazon warrior graves. Stories about fierce women warriors riding horses and shooting arrows weren't just myths. Ancient Greeks wrote about these legendary female fighters called Amazons. Everyone thought these stories were made up, like ancient Greek fan fiction. Then archaeologists started digging in Russia, and they found something wild. They discovered graves filled with women buried with weapons, armor, and battle wounds. At first, scientists assumed these must be men's graves because of stereotypes. But when DNA tests came back, they proved these warriors were actually women. One woman was buried with her legs still in a horse-riding position, like she was ready to gallop into the afterlife. She had arrowheads, a spear, and an axe. It's like finding a real-life Wonder Woman's tomb. These women weren't just playing soldier, they had actual battle wounds that had healed, sword cuts to the skull that they survived. Some of them had bow-shooting muscles so developed you could tell they'd been training since childhood. Scientists found that about 1/3 of all Scythian women's graves from that era contained weapons. These weren't ceremonial items either. These were well-used tools of war. They found arrows with impact damage, meaning these women actually used them in battle. The Greeks weren't making this stuff up. They were writing about real warrior women they'd encountered. Imagine being a Greek soldier, expecting to fight some dudes, and instead you meet an army of highly trained female archers on horseback. No wonder they wrote stories about it. Number 4. The Sinking of Helike. Imagine going to bed in a thriving city and waking up at the bottom of the ocean. That's exactly what happened to the ancient Greek city of Helike. One winter night in 373 BC, the entire city vanished. Before the disaster, animals started acting weird. Rats, snakes, and even bugs were seen fleeing the city in massive numbers. It was like they knew something terrible was coming. Then an earthquake hit in the middle of the night. A massive tsunami followed, sweeping in from the Gulf of Corinth. The wave was so big it went right over the city's walls. In just a few hours, Helike went from being one of the most important cities in ancient Greece to being completely underwater. Ancient tourists used to take boat rides over the sunken city. They reported seeing ruins under the water, and even a massive bronze statue of Poseidon, still standing, holding his trident. For 2,000 years, nobody could find Helike. Then in 2001, archaeologists finally discovered it, but it wasn't where everyone thought it would be. Instead of being underwater, the city was buried under an ancient lagoon, about half a mile from the modern shoreline. The earthquake didn't just sink the city, it changed the entire landscape. Sediment filled in the lagoon, burying Helike under layers of mud and dirt. Scientists found everything frozen in time, pottery with food still inside, coins, jewelry, and even the remains of people who didn't make it out. The city's patron god was Poseidon, god of earthquakes and the sea, the very god they worshipped, ended up destroying them. Number 3. The voice of the gods. Imagine you're in an ancient temple. The walls are massive, stretching up into darkness. Suddenly, you feel this weird sensation in your chest. Your vision gets blurry. You feel like you're being watched. And then you hear what sounds like a voice, but not quite. Scientists have figured out what was really going on. These temples were accidentally designed to produce something called infrasound. Infrasound is sound that's too low for humans to hear, below 20 hertz. But just because we can't hear it, doesn't mean it can't mess with us. Back in 1998, an engineer named Vic Tandy was working late in his lab. He kept feeling like someone was watching him and saw dark figures out of the corner of his eye. Turns out, a broken fan in his lab was pumping out infrasound at exactly 19 hertz. And 19 hertz happens to be the exact frequency that can make human eyeballs vibrate. When your eyeballs vibrate, you start seeing things that aren't there. Your brain starts playing tricks on you. Scientists found that ancient temples and cathedrals were accidentally built in ways that created these exact same frequencies. The massive stone columns, the huge empty spaces, and the wind blowing through them all combined to create infrasound. So when ancient people went into these temples and started seeing things, feeling weird sensations, and hearing voices, they weren't crazy. Their eyeballs were literally vibrating because of architectural accidents. Number 2. The Terrifying Roc Bird. Imagine you're an ancient sailor, crossing the Indian Ocean. You hear stories about a bird so massive it could pick up elephants like we grab chips from a bag. That's the roc bird from Arabian legends. For centuries, people thought these were just tall tales. Turns out these stories weren't completely made up. Scientists discovered something called the elephant bird in Madagascar. This thing was a 10-foot-tall bird that weighed as much as 4 adult men combined. The real bird couldn't fly or carry elephants, but imagine being an ancient sailor finding one of its eggs. The elephant bird laid eggs so big, you could fit 160 chicken eggs inside just one of them. That's like comparing a marble to a bowling ball. These eggs were about a foot long, the size of an average laptop. You're walking through Madagascar and you find this massive egg. Then maybe you spot some huge footprints. You rush back to your ship and tell everyone about it. By the time that story reaches the next port, that big flightless bird has turned into a flying monster that can carry elephants. It's like a game of telephone, but instead of mixing up words, people are adding wings and super strength. And these birds were still around when humans first arrived in Madagascar. Some of those early stories might have come from people who actually saw these giants. The elephant bird went extinct about 1,000 years ago, probably because humans kept raiding their nests for those monster eggs. Number 1. Mount Mazama's 7,000-year echo. In the 1800s, the Klamath people told geologists about a mountain that collapsed. They described a battle between the chief of the below world and the chief of the above world. The mountain erupted with red-hot rocks raining from the sky, and it collapsed into itself, leaving behind what we now call Crater Lake. Scientists dismiss this as just another myth, but modern dating revealed that around 7,700 years ago, Mount Mazama did exactly what the Klamath described. The sky poured down molten rock, and the mountain collapsed into itself, creating the deepest lake in the United States. The Klamath people had preserved this information for over 7,000 years. That's longer than the pyramids have existed, longer than writing has existed. Most stories change quickly. By the third retelling, Grandma going to the store becomes Grandma wrestling a dinosaur. But the Klamath kept this story intact for over 300 generations. When your entire world changes in one day, you make sure your kids know about it. Sometimes the myths aren't myths at all. They're memories. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.